Ride along each week as we share proven strategies to strengthen your business, energize your team, and create the business success you've been dreaming about. And now, here's your host, Rich Allen.
How often do you call strategic timeouts? Welcome to the Ultimate Business Tune-Up Podcast, where our one and only goal is to help you tune up your business so you can have the long-lasting success and fulfillment that comes from owning a solid, profitable, and sustainable business. Each week we dive deep into a single topic related to improving your business, improving your team engagement, or improving your relationship with your customers. This week I want to reflect a bit on the NCAA March Madness basketball tournament that's just finished. As I'm recording this episode, the Final Four is about to be played, so I don't know who won the tournament yet this year. But as you're listening to it, you already know, since this podcast episode is scheduled to be released on April 7th, just a few days after the final games have been played. There are a few things that I do know about this year's tournament. This is the first time in tournament history that not one number one seeded team made it to the Final Four. And besides that, there are no number 2 seeds in the Final Four, nor are there any number 3 seeds, or are there any number 4 seeds in the Final Four. What that means is that none of the top 16 teams in this year's tournament field made it to the Final Four. How can that be? The experts selected the best 64 teams in the country to play in this year's tournament, yet they totally missed it with their top picks. I've got a theory, and it goes with my question for you this week, which is, how often do you call strategic timeouts? If you're not a basketball fan, this may not mean much to you, but it's a question that I think each of us as business owners need to consider and reflect on a bit more, even if we're a seasoned veteran in running our business. Here's why. I think there are many similarities in the way that things work in business to the way things work on a basketball team. Consider this. Even though you go into a basketball game with a game plan, once your competition starts to play out their game plan, it may cause your game plan to be less effective than you had anticipated or hoped. Does that sound like anything that's happened to you in business? A basketball coach can put together a rock-solid team and even have some solid backup players that they can call off the bench when needed, but sometimes those players are just off their game and can't hit the shots they normally do day after day. Have you ever had your key players perform lower than your expectations? A basketball team may be taller, stronger, or faster than their opponent, but for reasons you can't articulate, the other team seems to be running circles around your team, and they have your normally talented players making more turnovers or missing easy shots. Have you ever had a competitor outmaneuver you in business and catch you flat-footed without a good response? I could go on, but I think you get my point. In basketball, just like in business, there are teams that seem to be unstoppable until some unknown team steps up and puts the stop on them. And we see the same thing happen in business all the time. So what? Sure, it happens. But what should we do about it, and how can you keep it from happening in your business? By calling more strategic timeouts. Here's what I mean. As I watched many of the early games in this year's tournament, I noticed that one thing many of the underdog teams did far better than those who were pre-game favorites to win was whenever the game started to get away from them, whenever the other team started to get on a roll and run up the score, or whenever the players had messed up on a few possessions and failed to score when they had the ball, the coach would call a timeout. They would stop the action and call the players into a huddle. They would quickly talk about what was happening, refocus the players on their game plan, or shift the game plan to a modified approach that would get a different result. Almost every time the coach made the decision to call a timeout, the team went back onto the court with some new insight, with a new plan, and a new sense that they could compete better. And each time, that team that moments ago was struggling to handle the ball, or couldn't make a defensive stop, or couldn't hit their jump shots, would go out and turn the momentum in their favor. As I watched this happen time and time again, I found myself watching to see if it was the more established, more seasoned teams that took these strategic timeouts, or was it the smaller underdog team that used their timeouts more strategically? I quickly came to the conclusion that these strategic timeouts were a very big part of the spanking that many of the underdog teams put on their bigger, more accomplished opponents. While the higher-ranked team coaches were relying on the strength and skills of their top players to get through a tough run when things weren't going well, the lower-ranked team coaches were quicker to stop the game, huddle up, help them see what was happening, and refocus them on their mission. As a result, this year there were more upsets than in any past years that I can remember. The underdogs ruled the tournament from the very first games. And the top-ranked teams began packing their bags to go home, while their lower-ranked competitors survived to play the next round. So what does all this have to do with you and your business? Well, I see businesses going through rough patches pretty frequently, especially when things are uncertain in the economy, or the market conditions are a bit fragile, or when a new competitor opens their business just down the street. Many times, the business that's struggling just continues to do what they've always done, thinking that they will just struggle through the difficult time in hopes that one day things will turn around. But too many times, by the time things do turn around, it's too late and the business is in bad shape, out of cash, having lost some good talented people, or worse, losing many of its best customers. And to make matters worse, when someone's playing in a basketball tournament, there's a scoreboard where everyone, including the players on both sides, can see the score, see the time remaining, and see the foul situation. But in business, most of the players or employees never see a scoreboard. They don't know what the score is, or how much time's left, or what the trend is looking like. Their job is to just play the game, not to look at the scoreboard. And if the business owner doesn't have their scoreboard to look at, then what happens? Likely, that's when everyone just keeps playing the game that everyone knows how to play until someone tells them that the game's over and they lost. But what if, as a business owner, you did have a scoreboard to watch, and your players knew what the key stats that they needed to watch on the scoreboard, and when things weren't going well for a short period of time, you called a timeout. And as part of that timeout, you called everyone together, helped everyone see what was happening, called a new set of plays, and re-energized your team to attack the market differently based on this new information. How much better would your team perform if you did that from time to time? How much wasted time would you save if you called these timeouts on a more regular basis? You see, the advantage we have in business is that we're not given a preset number of timeouts. In basketball, the coach must manage their use of timeouts because they only get a few each game. But you've got unlimited access to your timeouts, yet far too many business owners don't bother to use them. They simply get frustrated and even get a bit angry when the score on the scoreboards is not in their favor. I experienced this recently when one of my clients sent me an email expressing how frustrated they were that sales were down and they were burning through their available cash. So I quickly responded with let's call a timeout. Let's pull the team together, Make sure they all see the scoreboard, the data on orders, lead times, fulfillment rates, and backlogs. Let's discuss what's working and what's not working in our sales discussions with customers and prospects, and let's make some strategic changes. And later that week, we did just that. We pulled the team together, our huddle, and talked about what was happening. Everyone shared their thoughts and perspectives. Then the coach, the business owner, made a few strategic decisions and sent the team off to execute the new plan. I wish I could tell you how things turned out, but our follow-up meeting isn't scheduled for another week or so I'll share the results on a later podcast. But for now, I think the business owner made a smart decision to call a strategic timeout to get the team refocused and re-energized with a new game plan. I'm confident that the results will be far better than what they would have been had they just let the team continue to struggle, not doing anything or not trying any new sales strategies. How about you? Are you using your strategic timeouts to re-energize and refocus your team? If you are, great. You're probably seeing some good results because of your timely efforts. If you're not, perhaps you need to start right away. Even if you don't want to make big changes, you can use this approach to make small micro adjustments to your game plan. Just simply getting the team together for a brief huddle on a regular basis will keep them more energized and more tuned into what's happening around them. Let's be sure to learn something from these underdog teams who knocked off the big-name teams in this year's March Madness. It won't help me win the tournament pool this year. I lost that big time in the early rounds of the tournament. But it may help you win the battle in the marketplace as you compete with your toughest competitors. While they're struggling to cover your moves, you can be taking strategic timeouts to refresh your plan, re-energize your team, and take home the prize. As always, if you have specific questions or would like to bounce around a few thoughts on this topic, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Just remember, you're not limited on how many timeouts you can take. Just be sure to keep them strategic and use them when you sense a shift in momentum in your business. And do me a favor, share this podcast episode with your fellow business owners. You don't need to share with them how you're going to use your strategic timeouts, but I'm sure their teams could use the refresh and refocus as well. Be a good sport and help them compete in their bracket too. Thanks for joining me today. Be sure to tune in next week when we're going to discuss business math. You won't want to miss it. Meanwhile, if you have a question, suggestion, or would simply like to connect, shoot me an email at rich@tourtoprofit.com. Now go make it a great week, and whatever you do, ride hard.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Business Tune-Up. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, find more resources at tourtoprofit.com and connect with Rich by sending a message to rich@tourtoprofit.com. Until next time, ride hard.